Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, Claus Raasted. Welcome.
Thank you, Sara.
How's it going?
It's sunny, it's summer, and that's rare enough in Denmark that it's worth celebrating.
Claus, you help organizations get shit done. And you do a fantastic job at that because I follow you on LinkedIn and I always really value your input and your advice. But today we're here to talk about your other role as a director at the College of Extraordinary Experiences.
Director of the College of Extraordinary Experiences. Exactly. Yes, let us do that.
Wonderful. All right. So for those who don't know, anyone who watches my podcast, though, knows about the college already because I've had alumni on here. But for those people who don't know what the college is, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, the college, and your role at the college, please?
So I think the best way to describe the college is that it is a 5-day gathering at a castle in Poland where people from all over the world, all sorts of industries, backgrounds, age groups, professions, etc., come to unlock new ways of thinking about their business. They come to kind of get that spurt of creativity of looking at the world from a different angle in a way they probably never would have done otherwise. That's the idea, at least. And my role as one of the organizers is I'm the director. So I'm kind of the lead voice and also I'm in charge of creative direction and on-site kind of leading the thing.
That is about as much information as I had before I went there. Not everyone is, I feel, as adventurous as me, especially in so I've had a career in corporate America before I, went off and started doing my own coaching practice and everything. And I'm a little bit more of an explorer. One of the problems I had with the college was there was no agenda and there was no map of the castle and there was no schedule that was okay, Sara needs to be here at this time to meet with this group of people and here's some follow-up notes. And this was really hard for me. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the intentional design of the college that contributes to people really stepping outside of their comfort zone and really becoming innovative in a way that's not, I know there's so many classes that you can take on innovation and LinkedIn seminars on how to be more innovative. But I'll be really honest, I think I started thinking about my life very differently after I came back from the college. Not just work, but life. So tell us a little bit more. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the intentional kind of design, the environment. How do you do it?
How do we do it? So first let's paint a picture. That is that about 100 people arrive at this 13th century castle in Poland, which is also a hotel. So it's a castle hotel. It means it has things like running water and refrigerators, and there's even a nice pool, but it is also a 13th century castle. So it looks a little bit different than a classic conference hotel. And people arrive in buses from Berlin Airport where we pick them up. And from the moment they arrive, we kind of take over their reality a little bit. We dress them up in robes. We sort them into houses, a little bit Harry Potter style. And we say, trust us, you're in our space now, and it's going to be different. As you said, there's no clear agenda. Yes, we have one, but that's secret. There's no plan that we reveal to people. We don't tell them how to navigate things. And for a lot of people, they are used to being in places where they're in control. They're used to knowing the agenda and the goals and the KPIs and the if we're not using KPIs, then we're at least using key objectives and results or that sort of thing. They're used to having a very, I don't want to call it transactional approach to time and life, but at least a controlled approach. And what we say is, yeah, that's not going to work here. Here, the only thing we can offer you is we can offer a space that you are unfamiliar with, but that we have designed for you with the hope that you will meet people that are interesting and they will find you interesting. And together you will unlock new interesting things within each other. That's the simple premise of it. And I think from a intentionality standpoint, one of the things we do is we come from an experience design background. So the idea that experiences, whether they are music festivals or they are movies or they are video games or they are role-playing events or they are sales calls or team meetings, are all designed experiences. And no matter what you do, no matter what profession you're in, there's some part of your work that is about designing experiences for other people, whether it's how to greet them to your podcast or how to invite them in when you're onboarding new employees or how to make your store sparkle, right? Whatever it is, there's an element of experience design for other people. And we think that the best way to unlock new innovation, unlock new creativity, new ideas in people's businesses, their lives, their art, their whatever it is by letting them meet other people who do other things and listen deeply and connect deeply. And that's why the college is not a place for lectures and PowerPoints, but is a place where people come out with new deep connections, and from that all the magic comes. That was a very non-simple answer to a relatively good question. I'm sorry I got it all muddled up, but hopefully there was a little bit of something in there.
No, I think that was great. I want to go back to there was no lectures, no PowerPoints. I took a notebook to every class that we went to and didn't really take notes during the class because you couldn't, which was great. But then afterwards got a chance to integrate and like reflect on it. I've been to a lot of conferences in my life.
Me too.
And yeah. And I'll be really honest, like they're so boring. You know, they're just like you go in and you sit down and there's like a lecture and there's, a PowerPoint. There are discussion groups and breakouts. And I was really, really impressed with the design of the college because I got so much more out of it. And it was unlike anything else that I had ever experienced in my professional life. And I think one of the reasons was because of the people that show up there. Can you tell us a little bit about the networking aspect of the college and the type of person that this experience would attract?
Yes. So speaking from a conference background, right? Well, you go to conference, I go to a ton of them. I speak at a ton of them as well. So I really get to see many different ones in many different industries. And a lot of them are, they're not necessarily designed for human beings. They're designed for some sort of corporate creature that may or may not really exist in reality. And part of this, I think, if we take it back a notch, is most of us have gone to schools where learning was something that happened by us being told to sit down, shut up, and listen, and maybe some of the knowledge that is granted us from the stage by a teacher will sink in. Yes, there may have been like some assignments, or yes, there were some discussions or so on, but so much of the way we look at learning today is linked to the classroom. And the classroom has an overlord, a teacher, and it has these students who are there, and they shouldn't make too much noise, and they shouldn't be too enthusiastic, and they should definitely work within some very, very limited parameters, a limited rule set. And that, I don't know whoever came up with that for a way of learning, but it's not really something very many people enjoy. Some do, but most of us don't, right? So take that and that goes on into high school, goes on into university, and suddenly you have people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, and they go to professional conferences, and somebody somewhere told them that this is how learning happens. So we put people on chairs and we put somebody in front of a blackboard, which now is a PowerPoint because we're so technological. And then we have the same smart person talks to other people and hopes that some of the knowledge will stay with them. And I don't get it, right? One of the reasons I don't get it is that not that many people, when asked how they want to learn or how they want to spend their time, they choose that. Most people say at events, as you say, they go there and you ask them, why do you go to events? They go for the networking. They go for the people. Mm-hmm. Then ask them to look around and say, well, what do you think has been the least amount of money and attention and design has been spent on? Well, the networking, which is usually those 15-minute coffee breaks that's called networking coffee. And then you have a lot of sessions, which is basically a panel or some people, and most of the people sitting quietly while somebody smart talks to them. And this model, I think, is something that is just so strongly embedded in so much business culture that we keep on doing it, even though nobody really thinks it's a good idea. So whenever people get to try something else, whenever you give them alibi, you give them permission to try something else, then they will come as their colorful, beautiful selves, right? If you tell people to show up at a Zoom meeting and say, please change your backgrounds to your favorite superhero, the smiles on people's faces as Iron Man and Batman and Darkwing Duck and my mother and whatever, whoever else shows up on those backgrounds, right? The smiles on people's faces as you say, hey, this is a business meeting, but it's okay to be human. Those smiles are usually quite wide and they go across cultures. And I think at the core of it is, you asked who comes to the college. Well, we find that the people who are attracted to the college are people who say, I'm up for something different. I don't know what it'll look like, and that's part of the appeal. I know what I want, I know what I like, I know what I don't want, and I'm not sure what this is, but I'm ready for it to be something else. And that means they bring their best selves. People who go to the college are not necessarily more interesting than other people, or smarter, or gentler, or more caring, but they all come and they bring their best selves, and that makes them more interesting and smarter and more caring and more gentle and more vulnerable, all these sorts of things. And that means that people who leave the college say, wow, it was full of these amazing people. And in my experience, most people are amazing, but they don't always get the permission to be their full selves, because they need to wrap themselves into rules and conventions and structures that they don't really like. They need to not only put on the suit or the business dress, they also need to obey the social rules that, if you ask around, it's not that necessarily anybody likes them, but the structures are just so strong that they are obeyed by everyone. And at the college, we try to let people come as themselves. That has some pretty radical results.
Well, Klaus, as you were speaking, I was like, you know, who would be great to attend this college is like these people that are designing these really boring conferences. Do you ever have people that attend that actually do, like, that's their work?
So you ask one of the very, very interesting questions out there, and you hit one of the pain points, because I travel quite a bit in the events industry, like meetings, incentive events, conferences, blah, blah, blah. And I often get asked about this. I get asked about, like, why is there stuff that works quite well? And it's not just us. There are other events out there that do really interesting things. And why does none of it get to these big, boring corporate events, or these kind of standard ones that may be good, but could be a lot better? And part of it is that, in my experience, very, very few people from the center travel to the edges. And one of the reasons is that an event is ephemeral, right? It's there and then it's not. If you go to an event, then you are there. If you don't go to it, you're not there. You can read about it, you can hear about it, somebody can tell you about it, but it's not the same as being there. Where if you want to watch a movie, right? Let's say we want to watch some sort of silent movie from France from the 1930s that uses interesting cinematographic techniques. Well, we can probably find it somewhere, and we can watch the original, and we can say, oh, wow, they do such interesting things with the camera. Look here, it's upside down for a whole sequence, and notice how they're shading everything, blah, 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 right? We can do that. And if it's a theater performance, we have to be there to watch it, but it still plays in multiple areas. And if it's a computer game, we can play it. But if it's an event, then it's usually done once per year, or maybe just once ever. And that means that if you're not there, you're not there. So for people to innovate in meetings, it usually starts with somebody going to something that is different, for example, the college, and then coming home and saying, I have found out we could do it differently, right? You said yourself that not having that knowledge of what's going to happen and where does Sara need to be at 4 o'clock and all that was like you were there and you tried that on your own body and found out it didn't kill you. It probably at times felt like it would, but you survived it. And now on the other side, you're like, okay, I guess that's a design choice, not a necessity. but it takes people having those experiences, whether it's here or somewhere else. And in my experience, sadly, lots of people who do professional events and who do events professionally, they don't travel to the edges. They don't travel to the fringes to find the interesting stuff. So you have people at the edges who say, but this could be different. This could be better. You could just go there and try it out. And people say, yeah, well, yeah, no, we tried something new. I've had one of my kind of horror stories with a very, very dedicated, very experienced professional event organizer when I said, well, maybe your event, there's good things, but maybe some of the sessions could be more interactive, And she said, oh, no, 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 no. We have Q&A sessions, so they're super interactive. And I said, yeah, well, I may be thinking of something else. But to her, that was wild. That was wild interactivity, having the audience have a microphone for 5 minutes at the end after the speaker was done talking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that sometimes because ever since I went to the college last year, I've come back and I've taken things that I've learned at the college and incorporated them into like my own offsite facilitation, even my coaching, the way that I coach my clients, right? And I think about that and I'm like, what prevents people in the workplace from actually being innovative? And I think one of the problems, Klaus, that I've landed on is that when companies think about innovating and they think about doing things differently, you know who they call? They call the Deloitte
Guys.
and the
Yes, yes.
PwC and they call like literally the oldest, like most, like their business has not changed. When you think about consulting, right, it's kind of been pretty stagnant. Businesses call those people to help them be innovative, which I think is such an interesting choice.
Which is wild. And I have a past with McKinsey, and I was lucky enough to be pulled in as a senior advisor and coach from time to time as an experience design specialist and a culture design specialist to come in and kind of bring some of that glitter and magic, because somebody had asked McKinsey, hey, can you do something different? And I was one of those experts they would call in to actually bring that innovation piece. But that was also just a small part of it, and only some very, very high risk and kind of daring partners who said, yeah, let's bring in somebody who doesn't look like your normal PwC consultant, who actually is innovative. And I think part of it's also the tricky thing that the people who travel in spaces where there is money and power and reach and brand value, they tend to see the fringe as being quite close to themselves. I remember talking to some Los Angeles people who were like, we're looking for new innovative ways to do events. And I said, okay, well, maybe we should talk. And I said, yeah, but I was just at an event done by Fast Company, and they're one of the most innovative companies on the planet, and it sucked. And I said, well, maybe they're not that innovative. Maybe they're one of the most innovative companies within a certain space. But if you're looking for radical innovation, you probably won't find it there, because it has been sucked up by bureaucracy long ago. And there's a good friend of mine too he helps teams become A-teams. And one of the things he says very, very, very nicely is that the function of the bureaucracy is to keep companies from killing themselves. And that means they put in rules and regulations and standards and processes to stop people from killing something, right? To stop people from blowing up the boat. And any team in any company is fighting against these processes to get to do something interesting and new and worthwhile and lovely and human. But the bureaucracy is there to save the company from mistakes. And if you do innovation, you're going to have mistakes. Not everything is going to work out well. You can't roll the dice unless you are prepared to have them come up wrong, because they sometimes do. Even the best ideas sometimes go wrong, and sometimes the ideas are not that good to begin with. And then we test them. So I think part of it is the bureaucracy wants to protect itself. And the people who want to make change and make lovely things out there, make magic, they fight the bureaucracy. And the bigger the organization, the older the organization, the harder it is. There's a beautiful and terrifying quote about innovation that says, the longer something has existed, the better the chances are it will exist tomorrow. And if you take, for example, Christmas songs, right? If a Christmas song has been sung since 1898, And we have some in Denmark that go even further back than that. We'll probably sing it next year too. But if a Christmas song just came out last year, the chances of that becoming an evergreen, something that is now just part of the tradition, well, it may happen, but it's very, very hard. And that means that things that have been around for a long time, the symbol of Christianity is the cross. Try and change that, right? It has been that symbol for more than 1,000 years, a lot more than 1,000 years, nearing 2,000 years. If you go in and say, yeah, let's have a new symbol, that's going to be very, very hard. And that means that in these big beasts where we want to change things, whether it's Disney or it's by calling in PricewaterhouseCoopers or something like that, it's usually we look at the safe stuff. And that means innovation for a lot of people means A, calling Deloitte, and B, it's technical innovation because, ooh, that we can do, right? It's much easier getting $100 million for technical innovation than getting $1 million for culture innovation or design innovation.
Yes. And the cultural innovation or the design innovation, one can argue, would actually produce some very lasting results.
Insane results. And if we want just one of them, right? This is crass, this is commercial, but it's also very, very simple. Have you ever been to a McDonald's where somebody asked, do you want fries with that? Or something of that order?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because at some point, some smart person within McDonald's said, hey, why don't we get our frontline staff to ask the customers if they want to give us more money? And internally, I've heard that referred to as the do you want fries with that training campaign, because it wasn't that hard to do, right? You trained all your frontliners. You said when they've finished ordering, they've said, I want the burger and I want the fries and I want that. Then whatever they ordered, you asked them, do you want a little bit more, right? Do you want it large? Do you want it supersized? Do you want fries? Do you want a milkshake? Do you want a dessert? Do you want whatever? And some of them will say, no, I'm good. Thank you. And then you say, thank you. And you take their money. And some of them say, you know what? I'd like fries with that. So simple, not technological, not complex, not expensive, not even risky. It's not like people say, no, I gave my order and you ask me, how dare you, right? No, people don't work like that. Very simple. And it helped the bottom line like crazy. And yet you come and pitch something like that and say, hey, that's the sort of innovation I want to do. They'll say, no, 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 no. We've hired some software as a service consultants and they cost 10 times as much and we have no idea what they're doing, but that's innovation. What you're suggesting, ooh, we can't do that.
Yeah. You know, one of the things when I came back from the college, I was so inspired. I wrote one of my newsletters. I write a newsletter for workplace wellness, career strategy, and I did a newsletter basically re-engineer because this is how my brain works. I'm like, I wonder what they did because I feel very different. And so I reached into my psychology toolkit and I wrote this whole newsletter about, that just kind of looked at the key kind of experiences, a few of them, just even like the onboard, kind of like the orientation piece of it. And I kind of unpacked that and looked at it from the lens of psychology. And I sent out this newsletter. And a couple of people wrote back to me and they were like, this is so cool, but I don't know if I'd attend because, like you really had to wear robes all week. And it's funny because I talked about the value of wearing the robes all week. One of the things that I said that a contact of mine was like, this was an interesting take is day one, when I was walking around in a robe, I was like, this feels really silly and a tie, right? But like by the third or fourth day, anyone that I saw at the castle that didn't have a robe on, I was like, wow, strange. So it's like how our perception of what's normal and not normal kind of shifts and it changes, right? But Claus, for someone who is hesitant because of things like you wear a robe all week or like the experience asks you to let go of kind of your ego a little bit and be a little bit silly and be a little adventurous, for someone who's for whom that is the reason why they're hesitating, what would you say to them?
I would say go alone then. Right? And the reason I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek is that one of the things that keeps us from experimenting more as human beings is that we are in a position where we need to constantly have stable identities. So if I come out of I'm right now doing this wonderful podcast with you, and if I come out of my small home office space to my fiance and say, Sue, my name is now Peter, and I would like to be addressed as Peter. She's like, but we've been together for 7 years. What happened to Claus? No, I am now Peter. And Peter likes different things. He's like, okay, this is weird, but you do you. You're still nice. You do you. And then tomorrow I say, my name is Ahmed, and I like steak. And she's like, what is going on? That's not going to last very long, right? Because we expect other people to have consistent identities, which is fair, right? It's next time I meet you, you'll be Sara and I'll be Claus, and we'll be able to recognize each other. Fair enough. The problem is that if you're experimenting with something else, right? You're experimenting with a new wardrobe or a new haircut or a new approach or a new accent or new compliments or new, maybe you sing or maybe you don't, or maybe you do something different. Then the people who know you will go, what's wrong with you? And some of them will say, oh, it's so wonderful, Sara, that you've started complimenting us at parties. I really like that about the new you. And some of them will say, what's up with you, right? That's weird. Why are you telling me you like me? Like, we've been in the same room. Like, what's wrong with you? And the problem is, when we experiment, we shift that identity, maybe a little, maybe a lot. But the rest of our world tries to hold us back in the identity we have. Some will say support you in your growth or your change or your experiment and say, you go. But a lot of people will feel threatened by you trying on a new you. And whenever we're in a situation where we experiment, then we tend to come back a little bit different. And we tend to be different in the journey. Right? In the old Hero's Journey book by, what's his name, Joseph Campbell from 1947, one of the phases that the hero goes through, right? The hero goes away from the normal world and into the special world and has adventures and defeats challenges. And one of the things, when the hero comes back, there's one of the phases that is called the Master of Past and Present, the resurrection. And that is when the hero must reconcile who she was with who she is now. And whether you go to Colombia backpacking for 3 months, or you star in a reality TV show, or you go to the College of Extraordinary Experiences, or you are in a plane crash, or whatever happens to you that is different, when you come back, some of the people who meet you will say, you're different now. I like it. And some of them would say, you're different now. I don't like it. But what keeps us from experimenting is that last group. The people whose lives are filled with people who support them in growth and change and experimenting, they're not afraid of taking on new roles. They're not afraid of trying on a new haircut or a new boyfriend or a new job or a new way of doing something. But the people who are barely feeling seen as they are, right? They're afraid to step outside the lines, because none of us want to be greeted by our family, friends, and kids and loved ones and colleagues by somebody saying, what? What have you done? It was better before. I don't like this. What's happening here? And if you go to something as weird as the college, right? You put on robes, you have ties, you play around, it's goofy, it's weird, it's fun, it's strange. Then you need to be able to come home and tell people that, or just hide it, which is also a tactic. But you need to be secure enough with your identity that you're prepared to step outside it. And a lot of people, even well-meaning, lovely people, are pretty bound by their identity, either because they're so satisfied with it they couldn't even dream of trying something else, or because for most of us there's a fear. What will they say if I show up in heels? Right? I know this is a tangent, but there's an experiment done. I learned about it at the World Experience Summit here earlier this year, which was about men getting their nails painted. Right? So the experiment was men who volunteered. This was in London. A couple of hundred men who volunteered, and they got their nails done. So they got nail polish on their nails, and then for 3 weeks they would keep it there. And the journey these men went through was insane. And one of the stories that stayed with me from that was one guy, he's had his nails painted, he's feeling good about the thing, and he goes to his local pub. He's going to go down there and he's going to watch a football game and hang out with some people and have some beer. And as he picks up his hand, he grips the door of the pub and he sees his painted nails. And he realizes that there will be comments. Some will be positive, some will be negative, but everybody will comment. Nobody's going to just let his nails be, and he's not ready for that. Even the positive attention, he's not ready to have to justify and to have people be curious, because he just wants to have a pint at his local bar. So he looks at his nails and realizes, I don't have the bandwidth for attention, even if it's positive, and he goes home and watches the game at home. And that is sad, right? That is somebody who's trying to experiment, but doesn't have the bandwidth to say, yeah, hey guys, look at the nails. Oh, you like him? Nice. Oh, you don't like him? That's a you problem, right? Just the attention for that guy at that moment was too much. And I think for a lot of us, that's our reality part of the time. It's not that we think it's going to be negative, but just the fact that somebody feels the need to comment can be a bit much, whether it's a new haircut or going to a castle in Poland or trying on a new way of doing things. I'll try to make the next answer shorter. Sorry.
No, these answers are so, I just want to like dig in, and I'm like, wait, we only have like an hour for this. um Klaus, I think that's really, really important. Thank you for sharing that story and that perspective, because I, as a coach, I work with people who are trying to start their own businesses, and they're so afraid. And I think, have been very afraid to bring my full self to every organization that I've worked at. There have been, times in my life where I'm like, I think we can do this differently, but I don't say it out loud. Or I go home and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have said that. Or I really wish I would have, said no to that. Or, and we don't do it because it's comfortable. We like the comfort zone. And what I love about the college, I kind of distilled it into like the three kind of components of the college that I see that are really valuable. The networking, you meet really cool people. The learning, because I think the classes are very well designed to help you learn how to create experiences differently. The whole thing is very well designed to help you learn how to approach your career, your business, your workplace differently. And the third piece that I personally really, really loved was the personal and professional transformation aspect of it. I didn't know at the time. I mean, honestly, when I came back, I still didn't know what the heck the college was or how to talk about it.
We don't either.
But at the time, I was like, I don't know if this was part of what was supposed to happen, but I actually feel more comfortable expressing different parts of myself, like genuinely, authentically who I am. I'm less afraid of bringing that part of Sara into the conversation. And we know that there are so many parts of us. We're not just one type of person. We have all these different ways that we can show up in the world, different ways that we want to show up and express ourselves in the world. And I think it's really sad that we don't get to do that because of this expectation from other people of who we have to be, because consistency is so important. Can you share a story, or I know there's so many people that you've met through the college, but is there a story that specifically stands out from the college of someone who has experienced that personal transformation and has actually changed their approach to business and work that's really worked out well for them after having the college experience?
Yes, definitely. So there was a French participant a couple of years ago who said very beautifully, he was very poetic. And he said, before going to the college, I didn't realize how much personal development is actually business development, how much business development is actually personal development. And I thought, I'll use that. That's a nice quote. We'll take that. Thank you for that. And part of this is we see people who come in, not everyone, but some who come in with an idea of what their business is, whether they work in a leadership position or lower in the hierarchy, or they have their own business, or they're freelancer or professional artist. And then they get to see that through somebody else's eyes. And by seeing that, it changes how they see themselves. Right? We had one of the guys, this was the very first college back in 2016, a Danish friend of mine, Nils, who's a stand-up comedian, and he was already then. He was making a living out of it, but he was not making a good living out of it, but he was making a living out of it. And he said after he came to the college, when he came to the college, these were his words, he said, when I came to the college, I did the same as every other stand-up comedian I know. I focused 90% of my energy on creating better jokes. And when I came home, I realized that if I spent 90% of my energy on creating better experiences for my audiences, that mattered more. And he flipped the script on how he looked at things. There started to be more songs, and he started to be more aware of like, how is a show put together, and not just look at the raw material of the joke, like the delivery, but also look at how is it to actually be in an audience, and what does that mean? What more can you look at? And that changed his business from being struggling to being less struggling. And one of the reasons I know this is that a year after, at the college, 5 a.m. in the morning, he's telling that to two English street magicians. And one of them goes, I've just gone through the exact same transformation, right? That idea of flipping how you look at your business. And one of the things that I find interesting about that, and I go through this every year myself, I always come back massively changed year after year, is that what may seem completely simple and clear to somebody else can be very, very hard to see for you or for me. And then, but when you get to see something through somebody else's eyes and you trust their eyes, then it's hard not to go, oh, yeah, I guess I never considered that. Like, whether it's what are you selling or why are you selling it, or what are you in delivering? And I had an experience. This was not at the college, but it might as well have been, right? That I'd been hired to do a talk. And when I came to this talk, before got on stage, it was one of these industry conferences. I was hired to kind of kick a little bit of fun and energy and growth mindset into them. And I talk with the chairman of the organization, not one of the people who's hired me, but somebody who's okayed that I'm coming. And we get introduced, and he says, hi, it's nice to meet you. And I say, thank you for inviting. And he says, I'm really looking forward to your talk. I say, well, thank you for that. And he says, did you bring the sunglasses? I said, because I have sometimes used these rockstar sunglasses on my LinkedIn profile, and sometimes during presentations. I said, I didn't bring the sunglasses. And he looks all sad. And then I say, but I did bring the Batman jacket. And his face just lights up and he goes, oh. And it hit me at that moment that for this guy, he wasn't hiring me because of my deep technical expertise, right? For my deep understanding of the subject matter. He was hiring me because he liked the idea of putting a guy in a Batman suit on stage to provoke his peers a bit and kick them into thinking a little bit differently. And he was super excited about that. And when I came home from that trip, I'd experimented with the Batman jacket then. I bought 2 full Batman suits, right? Because I realized that what I thought what I was selling was not necessarily what people were buying. And one of the things that you can sometimes have those realizations on your own if you're lucky, but if you are in the right place with the right people and you talk to people, then it's much, much easier to have that. And at the college, what we see works best of all is people getting to be each other's mirrors, getting to sit when somebody sits down and says, I don't know what I'm doing, or I would like to do this, but I don't know how. And somebody else says, oh, well, why don't you try this? They said, oh, I never thought of that. I'll do that now. And that tends to lead to people experimenting more, being less afraid, being more open because they've been surrounded by these people who are very, very different, but who still do things and who still manage to make things work. And one of the hardest things in innovation or in personal development is believing something is possible until you've seen it. The moment you've seen it, then it goes from this is impossible to I wonder how I can do this. And the college is a pretty good place for meeting people where you think, I want that. How can I get that? Rather than that is impossible or that doesn't exist. At least that's one take on it.
So that's a great take on it. Thank you. I was going to ask about your Batman suit, and I was trying to figure out, like, should I tell people should I be very clear that it's like a jacket and slacks? Because I imagine then people are like, this guy's wearing a Batman like costume to conferences.
Considered it, but the body shape doesn't really fit the Dark Knight bat suit. Maybe 20 years ago, but now it would be like Batman gone slightly bad, more bad than bad. But I have considered it just for the fun of it.
Can't wait until you do it. I have a feeling you're going to do it at some point.
At some point, yeah, definitely.
At some point. Yes, you said you have transform every year at the college.
Yes.
Is there a story that you have from your own experience or a way that you can share with us that you've maybe changed or maybe a favorite moment that you have from the college?
Oh, many of them. But one of the things I had, and this was 2 years ago, as I came home, as I was sitting on the plane going home, I made a list. I also kind of coach people and that sort of thing. And I sat down and I made a list on my phone and I looked at all the projects I was involved in, both the ones I was leading and the ones I was helping with and the ones I was getting paid for and the ones I definitely wasn't and the ones where I might one day get paid, but right now not. And what I found out was that I have a bad habit coming from having this expertise in getting shit done and being able to move things from loose conversation to actual execution very, very fast. And I found that what I did was that I would meet these lovely people, many of them at the college, and then I would say, oh, you have this magic. You do this amazing thing. You just need a little bit help and then it'll be better. Then it'll grow more or reach more people or be sharper, or it might just make a little bit more money or have a greater impact. Let me help you. And they say, oh, wow, I love your help. That's really nice of you. And then they said, well, but I need this and this and this and this help. And I said, you know what? I can help with all those things. They say, oh, wow, that's even better. Said, so now we just need to do it. And I said, well, we do. And since I actually have experience with it, why don't I do it? They said, okay, this deal is turning better all the time. And then I realized when I looked at that list on that plane, I realized I had a tendency to go in and join projects. And instead of helping them, I would take on and say, okay, I'll take lead on some of the things. And the list of projects that was there was way too long for comfort. There were simply too many things I was trying to do or trying to lead or trying to help people do compared to what I was able to do. And I realized one of the tricky things is that when you go to something where you get inspired, is then most of us feel, I want to help. I want to make it happen. I want to be part of this. And if you don't stop yourself, then that can swallow you whole. And one of the things I came back from that was that I made a decision of saying, instead of going, oh, this is what you do, here's how I can help you. Then instead I'd say, here's what I do. Do you want it or not? And that seems like such a simple shift, right? It seems like such a banal, almost ridiculous shift to make. But for me, it was pretty profound to, instead of talking with people and saying, hey, I think I can help you with this and this and this and this. And they'd say, wow, I'd love that. Or, nah, I don't really want that. Instead, I would switch it to saying, here's what I do. Do you want that or do you not want that? Because suddenly I could much easier focus. I could much easier organize my business. I could much easier set up some pricing packages for some of the things I do. I could much easier say yes to things and much easier say no to things. So for me, it was a massive breakthrough. And the reason it came was from replaying conversations I'd had with the college, both of the people I wanted to help, but also those who said, yeah, but Claus, but why don't you do this or that? Or why don't you think of it this way? And one of them was, and this happened in a ball pit sitting at 2 a.m. in the morning with a Dutch friend, Mike. And Mike basically said, but Claus, instead of asking people what they need and then helping them, why don't you tell them what you do, and then if they need that, then you help them? I said, you're right. Those are two very different things. Huh. The lens just shifted. And I think part of what I try to preach and I try to also live by is that one of the things that is most tricky in life, there's many things that are tricky, and I say that as somebody with a 7-year-old daughter, is allowing ourselves to be inspired, right? We're all looking for meaning and love and connection, and sometimes even a little bit of money would be nice, and health and all these sorts of things. But where we look is sometimes quite limited. But this allowing yourself to be inspired, whether it's from watching a bug crawl on a screen or seeing a weird video on YouTube or going to a lecture at a very serious business conference, or it's having a conversation in a ball pit at 2 a.m. where half of it is very not serious, and then suddenly there's this moment. Allowing yourself to be inspired, I think, is pretty damn powerful. And one of the things I'm most proud of about the college is that people who go to the college tend to allow themselves to be inspired. And what happens then? Well, then they tend to be inspired. Not necessarily because they're not inspired in other places, but because here they go in with a mindset that says, I will allow myself to be inspired, and suddenly inspiration is everywhere.
Hmm. What an incredible moment. Um, yeah, that resonates a lot with me. I think I see a lot of my own tendencies in that story. I do think that once you kind of unleash your creativity a little bit, which is what happened to me after I got back from the college, I was just like, there were just ideas flowing out of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could do this and I could do that and I could do that. And you have to pace yourself and you have to be logical and like, what's realistic? What can I actually do? Klaus, this was such a beautiful conversation. I would like to wrap up by asking, I'm just so curious. Why does there's no advertising for the college that I've seen. There's no, like, it's kind of like you have to discover it a little bit, through people that have been there. I'm just curious, is that intentional? The lack of advertising?
I wish it was. It's actually just because we suck. Right? The actual honest answer is, and we believe in not radical honesty always, because that can be a little bit uncomfortable, but at least radical honesty when it comes to owning up to our own mistakes. We are terrible at marketing. We're terrible at advertising. We're quite good at producing magic. We have, and this is not just my words, but the words of some others. We're not that good at telling people what it is. And when we do, we're a little bit too honest about it. And I say that because I recently had a talk with some people who were giving some advice on how to market the college. And one of them said, on your website, it says you go here and you may experience this, but we don't guarantee it, or maybe this will happen, or this has happened to some people. Stop doing that. Tell them this will happen and you will be transformed. And when you come out, I said, but we can't guarantee that. We don't know that. It does happen to some people, yes. But I'm not going to stand there and say, if you go to the College of Extraordinary Experiences, you will come out as a different person and see your business or your life or both differently. It may happen. It definitely has happened. It has a good chance of happening. There's a better chance that it'll happen there than if you just take an EasyJet flight from Frankfurt to London, but it also might not. And I think part of the tricky thing about advertising in general, marketing in general, is that there's sometimes a thin line between promising a transformation that you can't really promise and being afraid to talk about it because you don't want to overpromise. And because what we do is kind of weird, right? You said it yourself, you've gone to the college and you still can't really explain it. I've been running the college for nearly 10 years, and the best way I can explain it is 5 days at a 13th century castle in Poland where people go to unlock new ways of thinking about their business. And somebody says, yeah, but what does that mean? I say, go and you'll find out, because that's the best I can do, which is not necessarily that persuasive, except when it is.
College happens in September of every.
It's September 15 to 19 this year. Who knows about next year?
All right. And are you still are you still accepting applicants?
We are still accepting applicants. We had hoped to be sold out here on the 19th of June, my birthday. We were not, and part of the reason for that is that the world has become a little bit even more uncertain since January than it was before. And it was crazy enough last year, but the last half year, it's just taken a turn towards the more uncertain. And that, of course, means that people are more likely to wait with making plans and commitments. Where once pre-pandemic, people would happily sign up 9, 10 months in advance. Now we're lucky if we get them to sign up 2 months in advance.
Hmm. That's interesting because I actually recently completed a certification in archetypal coaching, and one of the archetypes that we talk about is the renegade. And the gentleman who created the framework, who is our instructor for the session, was like, if you want to be future fit as an organization, as a professional, you have to activate your renegade, especially in these times, because times are very unpredictable. And so I think it's kind of the perfect time for people to go check out what the college is all about.
if you want to feel a little bit like a renegade, it's not the worst place to go for that. That I'll go along with that for sure.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we say goodbye?
Yes, I would like to share. Thank you for doing this, Sara. Thank you for not only being such a supporter and a nice human being, but also for giving me the chance to talk about something that I love, not just doing, but also talking about. That is deeply appreciated, and thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for making the time, and thank you for doing what you do and what you've been doing for 10 years. And I'm sure people tell you this all the time, but it kind of changed my life. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That sounds like a good thing to round off on, right?